Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ. Welcome to today's CUGC webinar with Synology. We're going to get started really soon, but before we do, I just wanted to point out a couple of events coming up. Our CUGC events calendar is very full this spring, which is amazing. Lots of great opportunities, and they're all free for you. Lots of local meetings going on. Our next CUGC XL event is in the Northeast, or I'm using air quotes that you can't see. It's our Northeast XL. We can't do it in person, but we will do it virtually. That's got a lot of great content. That's a full afternoon. It's going to be awesome. And then tomorrow, we have our next Geek Speak live panel. This is an hour of unscripted Q&A. We've got 4 CTPs are going to be answering all your questions if you have any about automation. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check that out. And there's a link in the chat for you to check out all of our upcoming events. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about storage and disaster recovery for Citrix, and this is a Synology presentation. This is their second one with CUGC, and we're so glad to welcome them back to our webinar stage. If you're curious, we are recording today's session, so you will get a link to that recording. It's going to come to you in an email from GoToWebinar. That'll come tomorrow afternoon, so be on the lookout for that. Also, we're going to take your questions today as we can, so put those in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can today. We might take some during and some after the presentation. It's just going to depend on how everything flows, but definitely put those in the chat as you have them so you don't forget them. And finally, at the end, I have a short survey link that I'll send you. It's anonymous and it's for CUGC use only. We just like to get your feedback, and there's also a place for you to submit ideas for future webinars if you have topics that you're interested in. We always want to know. All right, so with us today from Synology is Dustin Koontz. He's a product manager. He's going to be leading us through everything on this session, so I can't wait to get to him. But before that, I want to introduce Carl Webster. He's a CTP fellow. He's going to keep an eye on all your questions. Webster does an awesome job at moderating the discussion, so I'm sure that this will be a really fun, lively discussion today. So thank you, Webster, for being on for the discussion part.
Glad to be here.
All right, so Dustin, I'm going to hand things over to you in just a second, but first I wanted to share the results from the poll that we ran before we started. So we asked if how many of you had used Synology before, and it looks like about 31% of you use it at home and 13% at your business, and then about 56% of you haven't used it at all. So you're here to learn something new. So good stuff. So Dustin, I'm going to send you the screen right now. It's coming. Here it comes. And you can take it away.
All right, hello CUGC. So I'm Dustin. This is my second presentation for this group, but I see a lot of people here have not used Synology before, so hopefully I'm going to give you guys a lot of good information and you can check it out. So today we're going to be doing talking about complete disaster recovery. So it's going to involve both storage solutions and backup solutions. So I want to start off with a case study and show you right away what a Synology solution looks like in a real deployment. This is a communication services provider, and they have a few different things going on with their setup. They have a Citrix and a VMware environment with a number of VMs in each one. Their Citrix hypervisor is used for virtual desktops and for storage, where performance is a big factor. And then they also have a VMware environment that runs their services that needs a lot of storage, but not as much performance. Both these setups use Synology high availability for on-site failover between two identical NAS. They then back up the important data from this setup to a local NAS and then back up that to another NAS that is located off-site. So in the Citrix setup on the far left here, where they need high performance, they use two of our all-flash NAS. In the VMware environment, where the focus is on storage, they use 2 over 12-bay NAS that have very extensive expansion capabilities. And then for the backups, they have a one-use server, and then it just backs up to another one-use server that is located off-site. So everything I'm going to show you today is going to be completely license-free. So it's the same thing with this case study. Our storage and our backup solutions, the cost from us on our end is just the Synology NAS itself. So let me go ahead and dive into the core of the presentation that you've seen what this looks like in a real world solution. So in today's presentation, I'm going to show you how to use the Synology NAS for Citrix storage running on a high availability cluster, and then how to back up Windows PCs to a Synology NAS, and then how to protect all that data once it's on the NAS. So we're gonna start off with VM storage, but briefly, I do want to talk about hardware. So what Synology NAS is as a whole is a server that runs our custom operating system. So on the hardware side of this, we have everything from 1-bay products all the way up to 96 drive-bay products, so we can support over a petabyte of storage. These come in a variety of form factors. We have desktop NAS, we have rack mount NAS, and the different sizes for each category, and the different performance levels for each category. We support things like 10 gig Ethernet, redundant power, and so on. So if you want to check out that, go ahead and check out our website to see more about the hardware, because mostly this presentation is going to be focused on the software solutions, as that's where we, that's what is unique about us, that we develop really easy to use software solutions. So the operating system is called DiskStation Manager. It's otherwise known as DSM, so I'm going to refer to it as that from here on out. It utilizes a web-based interface, so there's no software required to run it, and we have a large variety of applications you could utilize on the NAS to get more productivity out of it. And most of that software, including everything I'm showing today, is completely license-free. So you can use our NAS for storage virtual machines through the ISCSI or the NFS protocol. We have ISCSI certifications through Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, and OpenStack. So we make sure that our implementation works across a variety of environments. Depending on what sort of hypervisor environment you're running, we do support ISCSI features like VAAI, ODX, and thin provisioning, and we can enhance the capabilities of NFS in a VMware environment as well. So I'm going to do a number of demos today, and this first one is just a walkthrough of what it's like to set up ISCSI and NFS on our systems. So here is the DSM interface. So I'm in a web browser. It's full screen, so you're not seeing the URL bar or anything like that. This is a desktop-based interface. So when I say desktop, the things that you're looking at here are just shortcuts, and then you have a full list of your applications in the start menu up there. Mainly, this is you're going to work through the NAS through the control panel. So I'm going to open this up. This is where you manage your users, if you want to connect it to a domain, if you want to adjust various network settings, this is where you do it. So what I'm going to show you here is just how to set up NFS. So NFS is set up in the File Services menu. So you can see that for file storage, we support a variety of protocols. So here, you're just double checking that NFS right at the bottom is enabled. And of course, it is for the sake of this demo. And we do support NFS 4, 4.1, so you can enable that if you need it as well. So the next thing to do for NFS is to go to the shared folder section. So shared folders on a Synology NAS are the level at which you access the data. So we have your storage pool, which is your RAID. Then you have a volume on top of that. And then the volume holds the shared folders. So you don't access the volume, you don't access the RAID directly, you access the shared folders. So you can see all these folders are listed on volume 1. So I'm going to click on this Citrix one and click edit. So when you create a shared folder, you're going to see all these options, like what do you want to name it? Do you want to enable various features? I'm not going to go through all that. I'm just going to jump straight to the NFS portion here. So there's a tab for NFS permissions. And I do want to say that you only need to set this specifically for NFS for just for general file storage, like if you use SMB or AFP. Either you don't have to go through this, it's just it will use whatever permissions you have set up on the NAS elsewhere. So for NFS, I make sure to highlight this because it does require this extra step. So I've already created the permissions, so I'm just going to edit it and show you what is in this menu. So you need to declare a host name or IP address, and you can use wildcards. And what that is saying is that host name or IP address has access to the shared folder through NFS, and then you set up your privileges and any other features that you need right through this menu. So a couple of extra steps, but easy enough to do. Just make sure that your host name or IP address matches what you're trying to connect to NFS. And in this case, of course, it is my Citrix hypervisor, and that's its IP address. So that is a very simple setup that we have for that. So I'm going to close the control panel. So we have NFS set up. That's ready to go. Before I jump into Citrix hypervisor, I want to show you ISCSI as well. If you're not familiar with ISCSI, or you just need a refresher, what ISCSI does is it has, instead of using a shared folder, it is a separate bit of storage on the NAS that is defined independently. It sits on the same volume as your shared folders, but what it does is it allows you to essentially serve that storage as if it were a disk over the network. So your hypervisor or your computer actually formats that ISCSI LUN and then is able to use it. So let me set one of these up. I'm going to go to the target section. The target is what you connect to. You can see it has what kind of looks like a URL called the IQN. And when you connect to this, it shows you all the LUNs that are hosted on that target. So I'm going to click create. You can see here, you can just name it whatever you want. So I can name it demo. You can change the IQN if you want. I'm just going to leave that as default. We do support CHAP and neutral CHAP, so that's just authentication for ISCSI LUNs. So the target is created. The same wizard will let you create the LUN itself. So I'm going to open up this advanced options features and just talk to you about all these settings. So once again, I'm going to give it a name, change the amount of storage. You could change where it's stored on the NAS itself. We do support thick and thin provisioning. So thick provisioning, I have this 5 gig LUN. It will always use up 5 gigs of storage. Thin provisioning, if I have a 5 gig LUN with 1 gig of data on it, it will only use 1 gig. But I'll show you another feature here. When I go into thin provisioning, I now have access to more settings. So we do support space reclamation. You want to check if your hypervisor supports this and what steps you need to take to make that happen. But space reclamation is like this. Let's say you have that 1 gig of storage on your LUN, and now you filled it with 5 gigs, but now you've deleted stuff. When you delete stuff without space reclamation, you want to get that space back. So space reclamation will give you the space back, but you got to make sure your hypervisor works with it. And it's not checked by default. Also, for performance reasons, when space reclamation runs, it can reduce performance as it adds more operations to the NAS. So that's up to you if you want to deploy it. The hardware assisted features that you're looking at, that depends on your hypervisor as well. So double check which ones make sense for your environment. And the one that is for the Synology NAS itself are snapshots. So thin provisioning lets you use snapshots. Snapshots are a point in time version of your ISCSI LUN that you can restore to. So if you have a snapshot every hour, you could restore an entire ISCSI LUN at each of those hours. So it's a very powerful tool, and I'll show you that more in depth later on in the presentation. Click next, click apply, and now we have an ISCSI LUN created and we have NFS ready to be connected to. So both options are available. It is up to you what you want to use. So let me hop over into Citrix. So right here, you can see that I have NFS connected, I also have ISCSI connected, and I also have SMB connected, but the SMB isn't for the VM storage, that's just for my ISOs. So you can see that it's already done. To connect to NFS or ISCSI is really easy. So if we connect to ISCSI, you can just use all the default settings here, name it however you want. To access it, I just put in the IP address of the NAS that I'm using, scan it, select the correct target, which was this one, and then it'll show the LUNs that are available. And I do want to show this compared to NFS because it has some slightly different steps. So I'm now connected to the target. The next thing that's going to happen is it wants to format it. So in this case, when you use ISCSI, Citrix is actually going to format it with the file system it wants to use. So that is one consideration you want to make. When you use NFS, the NAS is in charge of the file system. So we support ext4 and BTRFS, and BTRFS is what you need for snapshots and is what we have recommended now for the last couple of years, but the choice is ultimately up to you. And of course, once you're connected, it shows up the list. So very easy to set up no matter which protocol you're using. So feel free to mess around with either one when you're ready to deploy this yourselves. All right. So the hardware that I'm using for the setup is a high availability cluster, which means I have two identical NAS and they're directly connected to each other to provide hardware failover capability. So let's look at this diagram. You can see that there's two NAS there in the bottom right, and with one is marked active and the other one is marked passive. What that means is the active one is in use and the data is being automatically copied over to the passive in case there's a failure and it needs to become active. So in the event of a failure, as you can see here, there'll be a transition period where the system detects something wrong and then starts to move the active services over to the passive server. The former passive server is now the active server. A virtual IP address is shared between each NAS for this process, so there's no reconfiguration necessary, and the clients that are connected to the NAS can work as normal. So let me give you an overview of what the interface looks like. So let me close out the ISCSI manager in DSM. So Synology High Availability is just another application that's on the NAS. So I'm going to open this up.
So quick question, Dustin. Do I need a special license? Is this an expensive option to get HA?
That is a great question. HA does not require a license. Your cost is just buying that second NAS.
Nice.
And as you see here, it's available on a wide variety of models. So I have 2 bays that are running this just for the sake of this demo. This is an active passive setup. So I mentioned that before. You can see the relationship here. The one that's active on the left side, you can see, it's using more of its CPU. The load average is higher. The passive one is, not doing much. All it's doing is receiving the data from the other one.
So do the two nodes need to be exactly identical? Same networking, same CPU, same RAM, same drive, same model?
Yes, so in high availability in our products, you need to have a completely identical setup. So that is completely correct. You need to have identical RAM, identical sized hard drives or SSDs, the exact same NAS model. So this is something that you want to plan out when you are doing your deployment, and make sure that is correct from the beginning.
Okay.
So just a few of the things that I want to highlight in this section is the network settings. So I mentioned that there's a direct connection between each NAS. So that's the heartbeat interface. And the heartbeat, you just want to use whatever your fastest connection is. This is a super simple setup. It's just gigabit links. And then you also have your cluster interfaces. So they have a shared IP address between each NAS. So when there is a failover, there's no configuration to be changed. You just keep using the same IP address. So that means your clients, whether it's Citrix hypervisor or you have, an end user using it for file storage, they don't have to change anything. It will just, have a brief amount of time where it's in that failover mode, and then once it's back up and running, then it connects to it as normal. And then we do have failover for specific services. So primarily, I always describe high availability as hardware-based failover. If the NAS dies, it loses power, too many hard drives died, your volume crashes, that sort of thing, then that will trigger a failover event. But in the rare case where you have a service level failure, let's say ISCSI or NFS fails, then you could also have the passive NAS take over in those cases. And since it's on the page, I'm just going to mention Quorum Server. This is just an external server that is used to prevent split brain. So each of the NAS in the cluster will just ping this external server to prevent the, like during a failover, the possibility that each of them tries to become active. This is just something that helps prevent them from both going active, so they stay in their active passive roles as expected. And it says, if you're reading the text there, it says you can use a DNS server. So yeah, I literally just have a public DNS server, and that's something you can use for that. Okay, so you saw this in the diagram in that first page of the high availability manager, but I'm running this on two bay NAS. So this is your entry point for high availability. In this particular case, this would be for like small businesses that don't need a lot of storage, but like they can't have any downtime. This would be good for that. And this is available on a very large number of our products. The basic requirements are a Plus Series NAS or better, which is our NAS that run Intel or AMD processors, and then they need at least 2 Ethernet ports. So pretty minimal requirements for this. So when you want to do a large deployment, we do have some hardware that is built just for this purpose. So we have the UC3200, which is a 12-bay ISCSI only NAS with a 5-year warranty that is capable of hitting 150,000 random write-offs. So this is our only NAS that has an active setup rather than active passive. It has 2 controllers in 1 NAS, so you get failover between either controller and the option to use each controller at once if you want. We do have another NAS called the SA3200D, which you can check out on our website. It has the same dual controller design, but it does allow you to use any of our protocols. So this one is ISCSI only, but we do have one that will let you do NFS, SMB, etc., and run all of our usual applications as well. But that one is active passive. So it's our traditional high availability like I just showed you, instead of being active. So what is the benefit of these dual controller setups? So let's compare high availability with a traditional 2 NAS cluster to our dual controller models. So right away, you're already paying for 2 NAS instead of 1. If you need to add more storage through expansion units, you also have to double the amount of expansion units in our traditional setup. Then when you consider the cost of the drives on top of that, you've now doubled your drive cost as well. So you can see this starts to quickly add up, and the cost of the drives can actually be one of the most expensive things in a deployment like this. In comparison, in a dual controller setup on the right, when you add expansion units, you don't need to double them for high availability because the storage is actually shared between both controllers. So now when you look at the cost of the Synology products here, you're saving money, and then you're also saving money on the drives because that storage is shared, so you're not doubling the amount of drives that you have to buy. So there's actually cost savings, and you're making your deployment more efficient, like less rack bays used, less power used, and it's going to be easier to set up as well. All right, so now you've seen some of the software and some of the hardware that you can use for VM storage. And with our hardware, mostly you get access to all the same software on each NAS. That's especially true if you're looking at our Plus series or better, which are the ones where we have Intel and AMD processors. So from here on out, I'm not going to talk about the hardware much, and it's just going to be software focused. So let's move into Windows backups now. So our second case study for today comes from the University of Washington here in Seattle. A few years ago, they started to look for new backup solutions for the School of Social Work, which has about 300 staff and students total. They considered cloud backups, but the costs were very high at this scale, so they wanted to explore other options. They wanted something that was not only cost effective, but maintenance free and privately hosted. They found out about our active backup for business software, purchased an NAS to deploy it, and now are able to back up over 200 faculty machines without any license fees. In the end, they ended up saving over $200,000 compared to cloud solutions, and now have a fast and easy to use on-prem backup solution. An example of how this was used was when a faculty member had lost a file and they really needed this one particular file. The bad news is that they didn't know where it was stored. So Active Backup for Business does let you do individual file restores alongside full computer restores, but the problem here is they just didn't know where the file was. So the solution here was to boot up the backup as a virtual machine using our virtual machine manager software, which then let the user log in and find it the way that they're used to in their workflow. And I do believe the workflow was that they open up Excel and the file is just always there in Excel. So they didn't know where it was exactly. They just know when they open up Excel, it's always there. So once they were able to boot into the VM and figure that out, they were actually able to restore that file for like their new computer or whatever the situation was. So that's an example of how our backup software can be used. So what is this backup software exactly? So Active Backup for Business provides centralized backup for Windows computers, including Windows servers, while also offering VMware and Hyper-V backup. Today, we'll focus on the Windows backup features. Backups will give you a version history, so it can restore to any point in time you have kept a snapshot of the backup, and also supports deduplication, which makes it very space efficient. You could restore PC images, you could restore individual files from those backups, and you can even spin up backups as a virtual machine. So you have a lot of restoration options. And let's go into DSM and show you this interface. Okay, so I'm going to open up the Active Backup for Business software. Unfortunately for this webinar, I was not able to get a full demo up where I have constant backups running, but you can still get the idea of how this would look. So on the top left, you have your protected devices. So since it supports a number of different backup types, that gives you a quick summary of like what you're backing up for each one. The backup calendar, it will have a lot more color when it's actually in use, but it will show you like a green icon when all the backups are fine for that day. It'll show like an orange or yellow one if there's something you need to check out, and then a red if there's something critical, backup didn't run, backup failed, that sort of thing. You can see on the right side you have quick access to logs, and right when you pop into the application, and of course from there you can go view the full log list if you need to. And then the last thing I want to highlight is right there in the middle, storage status. So this supports deduplication, but deduplication is not a system-wide feature. So this is actually where you want to look to check how much of your data is being deduplicated and what the actual file size is.
So Dustin, did you say this was DSM?
Yes, this is the DSM interface still.
So, because this looks different than the DSM that's on my 1817, 1817 plus. So is there one DSM, or is there a DSM per type of Synology NAS with the features that are used and stuff?
No, so there is only one DSM. It's available across all models. There is
Nice.
an update coming out that will change the interface, but this is still the current version. So one DSM across all of our products. The only difference is on our NAS that have Intel and AMD processors, there is some software such as Active Backup for Business that only runs on those products. So we do have some lower end models that are they use like ARM CPUs, so they don't have as much software, and that's really the only difference. DSM itself will look the same.
So as I move up in NAS capabilities and features, I'm not having to learn a new management interface because the management interface is the same.
Exactly. So yeah, one thing that we kind of like to stress is if you're using it at a home lab, it's easy to take those same skills that you learned, just play with it yourself, and then take those into your business or deploy it for a customer because it's going to work the same. You don't have to learn anything new. You apply the skills you already have.
Good. It's a very smart move on Synology's part.
Yeah, it definitely makes the product line very simple to administer, and you don't have to worry about any features being too different based on what you're using. So yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
All right, so overview page gives you like what it says, overview of everything that's going on. So let's look at an actual backup now. So in this PC section, you can see that I already have some backup in here, but they're not backed up. So this just means I've connected the machines, but I haven't done anything with it. I just want to show you, something in here. The task list is will show you when the next backup time, what happened in the last backup, where it's actually stored on the NAS. So this is all the stuff that shows up after you've done your backup. So how did I get a backup done in the first place? So one thing that's nice about this software is you're going to do pretty much everything on the NAS itself instead of on the computers that you're going to back up. So if I go to settings, I go to template, then I can click create. And a template is going to determine how the backups are done. So I'm just going to call this demo. Then apply to is the users. So let's say that you have a specific group for the marketing department. If you have a marketing group, you can just choose marketing, and then it will do all their backups the same way. So if you're attached the NAS to a domain, like that would populate in the area, and you could do your different groups there as well. You get to pick the device type. There aren't too many differences between these. The main difference is that a physical server backup can be restored as a virtual machine, but if you need to, you can also convert a PC backup into that same backup type. So you don't need to worry about this too much.
And what's the licensing cost for this?
The licensing cost for Active Backup for Business is free. There is no license cost.
Nice. So it sounds like Synology isn't always a money grab.
No, we just want you to use our software. So buy the hardware, and then as I mentioned at the start, most of the features, very, very large number of them, don't have any licenses, and everything I'm showing today is license free. So we're not going to sneak that up on you when you want to deploy Active Backup or use it for virtual machine storage.
Nice.
Alrighty, so this next part of the wizard is just where do I want to store it. I'm just going to use the default folder. A backup option, so you can back up the whole computer. You can back up the external hard drives, so uncheck that if you want, or you can back up just your Windows partition. For the task settings, this is referring to compression and encryption in transit. So this is not at rest. We are adding encryption in rest in the next update for Active Backup for Business. So that is in beta. Do not install that beta for protection, but if you have a secondary NAS I saw the the half of you that have used Synology before, check it out on a secondary machine, but don't use it on your primary. But yeah, we do have encryption and rest coming in the future. So next up is the backup schedule. So I'm going to highlight this because you're going to see the same sort of scheduling in a lot of the demos I'm going to show you as we go on today. So you could back up by time. So you can choose what days of the week you want to back up, and then how often you want to back up. So you can do hourly backups if you want, and you choose when they start. For Active Backup for Business, because we're backing up Windows computers here, you can do backup by event. So when they lock the screen, when they sign out of the computer, when they start up their computer, you can have a backup run at that time. And if you're thinking, oh no, that's gonna interfere with their workload, it's gonna bog down their computer or the network, well, you can configure backup windows where the backups don't run. So you can block it out, during their work hours or whatever you want to do. And then this last option is just to back up instantly after the client is connected to the server. That means the first time startup, when the client is connected, it will run a backup right away. So this is something else I want to highlight that you're gonna see similar interfaces in the other demos, but this is retention policy. So this is for versions, which are also known as snapshots. It's all the same concept. This is saying how many versions do you want to keep for daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly versions? So you'll see this worded a little bit differently in the other applications, but it's all the same idea. If you have 12 monthly versions kept, then it's saying once a month it's going to keep one. So, you know, like January 1st, it'll have one. February 1st, it'll have one for 12 months. All right, and then nice little summary, double check that, and then you're good to go. Now, I'm going to show the client as the last part here, and there really isn't much to show you. So the client is, you just install the application. I already have the IP address to make sure that I didn't forget it when I was doing the live presentation. So I'm just going to log into it. And since this is a local connection, the certificate is not trusted. You can do this over the internet if you want. So that's why it is asking you about that. If you do this over the internet, I would say to use a VPN. But if you don't use a VPN, you actually can do a direct connection if you forward the right port. So, and that's it. Do you notice the backup client disappeared right away because there really isn't anything else to do. The only thing the end user can do is they have a button to the restore portal. The restore portal will let them restore files on their own. So if you're the administrator for the system, you could say you don't have to go in and find their files for them. They can go in and restore it themselves. And once it's set up, it's good to go. It'll just run in the background on its own. And the user can't log out of it either. It'll ask for an administrative password to log out of it. And so the client it's super simple. It's meant to be completely hands-off, and all the work for setting it up was done on the NAS.
So Dustin, Dennis asks, is there no backup for Server 2019?
I would have to check the exact versions. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
All right. So I've shown you VM storage and Windows backups. So let's kind of imagine that these are all part of a single deployment. So we have the storage, we have backups. So what about protecting all this stuff? So one of the reasons that you want to protect this is because of ransomware. So ransomware continues to be a very big issue. For the past few years now, every few weeks come across some sort of story about a business, school, or government institution being infected. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the FBI is reporting a 75% raise in daily cybercrimes. So to deal with this problem, companies are paying the ransom, and these payments average $100,000 each. So what can a Synology NAS do about it? So no matter the exact implementation you use, the core concept that we stress is having multi-version backups and snapshots. So you saw the multi-version backups for Windows desktops, and we apply that concept throughout our products. So in this example here, you can see that we can have backups or snapshots every 5 minutes. And the reason this is going to be important because you're going to be able to restore to a point before the data was infected. So let's say you get attacked. At this point, you want to deal with the ransomware directly. So you're turning off machines, you're disconnecting internet connections, that sort of thing to stop the spread. Mostly what you see is Windows machines getting the actual ransomware, and then the Synology NAS is connected as a network share. And so the data on the Synology NAS is what is going to be infected there with the ransomware. So at this stage, you're making sure to isolate the NAS, make sure the ransomware isn't spreading anymore, and then you're removing that ransomware or wiping the machines, whatever you need to do to fix your network. So once all that is done, then you get to restore the data. So you're restoring from one of the backups from before the infection. So backup versions and snapshot data is a read-only and would require a sophisticated Synology-specific attack with the capability to delete the data. So in most cases, your backup versions are going to be intact, even if a backup ran when the data was infected. So that means you can restore from whatever point you feel comfortable from before that ransomware got onto your network and was dealt with. And since you're going to restore that data yourself, you don't need to pay the $100,000 to the attackers, and you can get everything up and running, no problem. Oops, sorry, I went to the end there. One second while I go back. Sorry about that, I hit the end button. So to bring this all together, we ensure that you have multiple backups to ensure that you are able to restore from an unaffected point a copy of the data. we do want to have you do multiple backup destinations because you just never know what's going to happen. So if that first device is completely compromised, let's say that there is a situation where they were able to get into the Synology NAS and delete your data. Well, in that case, like you need a second device to restore from. So you do want to consider multiple backups as well. And I'll talk about doing that in just a few minutes here. And the last point here for ransomware is unique admin credentials. What we are talking about here is making sure that if you have a login for the NAS for an administrator, make sure it's different than your Windows login. It's a different login for each NAS. Make sure everything is completely separate. So if credentials do get compromised and they know them, they don't know all your credentials. And one thing I do want to stress is for our snapshots, they are going to be read only. So to begin with, you're going to need an administrator to actually go in there and remove that data in the first place. So it does have a basic level of protection automatically built in. And then from there, just follow good practices to make sure that it's protected. So that was a broad view of our ransomware plans and how you deal with that. So let's start to get a little bit more specific. So here we have a NAS. The NAS is being used for storage by a desktop computer and a hypervisor. If the computer gets infected or breaks, you can do a restoration with our active backup for business software and go back to before it was infected. Now, if your VM storage gets infected, that storage is actually on your Synology NAS, so you need to deal with the problem at the Synology NAS level. You could restore an ISCSI snapshot, or if you use an NFS, then you could restore a shared folder snapshot using our Snapshot Replication software. So let me show you that. So Snapshot Replication is a very easy to use tool that is essentially sorted into 3 functions. The first are on-device snapshots. So when I was talking about restoring from specific points in time, this lets you do that with any data on the NAS. It doesn't necessarily have to be active backup for business data. So you can do these snapshots every 5 minutes, and you get customizable retention policies, so you don't need to keep every snapshot ever, and you can set something that works for you. Next, we have replication, and that is just backing up the data and snapshots from one Synology NAS to another. And then lastly, there are a lot of restore options here. So you can browse individual files, you can restore entire ISCSI LUNs or folders, and that can happen with the data that is on the NAS itself, or if you've replicated it elsewhere. So snapshots can occur every 5 minutes, but they are instantaneous and will have minimum impact on performance thanks to the underlying BTRFS technology used. Likewise, recovery can be just as fast when the snapshots are on the same system. Even when replicated data and you're pulling that back onto the original NAS, that's also a very fast and efficient process just because it's all built into the file system. And one thing that I like to talk about for Snapshot Replication that some people don't always realize that it does is it has a failover option. So this is a manual failover mode where you can use the replicated data in place instantly in the event of emergency. Then when you've resolved the emergency and your NAS is up and running, you can send the change data back and set up the original replication relationship. So the use case for that is instead of doing a restore from that offsite location, you're just directly using the offsite site location temporarily. And I will show you what the interface for this one looks like. So let me close Active Backup for Business. And now we're going to open up Snapshot Replication. So you can see this is another thing that's pretty consistent in how we design our applications. It's an overview page. So here in the overview, it's showing that part of the data isn't protected. Part of it is protected with snapshots, and part of it's protected with replication. So it gives you a nice overview of everything that's set up. So for to set up snapshots, it's pretty easy. You can see I already got some stuff set up for my Citrix and ISOs folders. Just to show you the settings, I'm going to go click on the Active Backup for Business folder. So I mentioned that you'll see the kind of the same interfaces for a lot of what we do, just to make it easy to use. So here, exactly what you saw for Active Backup for Business. Choose the number of days, choose how often you want to do the snapshots, and the snapshots can be every 5 minutes if you want. and then retention settings. So you can keep all the snapshots. You could specify a number of snapshots to keep, just a flat number there. And then also set an advanced retention policy. And that's similar to what I showed you, how many daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly snapshots do you want to keep. You can also choose when to delete snapshots that can use up system resources. So you can just run it in the middle of the night. That's what the default setting is. And the last thing I want to mention here is this make snapshots a visible option. So when users access the NAS, let's say they log into the web browser, which is like the easiest way to log in remotely if you don't have like a VPN set up. You can make the snapshots visible to your end users in a folder. And as I mentioned before, this is read only. So all they could do is copy data out of it. They can't mess with any of the snapshots. So this is a good option for administrators where they just want to make things easy. If they are connecting through SMB share through Windows, it actually does integrate with the previous version's features. So you don't have to make the snapshots visible for Windows. So this is just for when you connect through anything else. Okay, so as in this last part, I've been kind of wanting you to consider everything I've done so far as like one deployment, right? So similar to what we had for the case study at the beginning. So you have your backups, you have your VM storage, and you can also replicate all that data off-site. So when do you actually want to use this? Well, in a worst case scenario, so let's say everything is down at one location. It could be ransomware, it could be hardware failure, there could be a fire. These are all situations where you want to consider protection for your data. So, and the way you want to do that to provide that next level of protection is to replicate it with an offsite NAS, and then you can restore from an offsite backup. So let me show you a quick demo of that. So we're staying in Snapshot Replication. As you can guess from the name, the other function of it is replication. So I'm gonna click create. This is talking about your replication options. So we support extended replication, so you can back up from one NAS to another, and then also one-to-many, so you can back up one NAS up to 3 different NAS. We do support local replication, so your backup should always be on a different piece of hardware. So this is if you have like an expansion unit and you just want some local replication abilities. I'm going to do a remote replication. Technically, it is a NAS on my lab network here, but you can use a VPN. You could set up port forwarding for this. So when you do use port forwarding, that's when you want to use the encrypted connection. If you have custom DSM ports and things like that, then there is an advanced setting menu where you can adjust that and make sure everything is good to go. For the sake of the demo, I'm keeping it very simple. So what it's going to do is it's going to log into the destination NAS. So logged in, it's showing me how much storage I have available for the replication. Click next. Let's go ahead and replicate our active backup for business data. This is very straightforward. It's saying, do you want to copy the data over the network, or do you want to copy it to a storage device? So you could actually do an export to like a USB drive. In most cases, I really don't recommend this just because the amount of storage that you would need in the first place. The easiest thing to do if you want to set up replication of a lot of data is just bring both NAS on site, replicate from one to the other, and then bring the second NAS off site, and then just adjust the replication settings for the replication you've already made. So you can go in there, change the IP address or add a domain name, whatever you need to do to get that working. So scheduling options, exactly what you've seen before. And this one also has an option to only send snapshots within a specific window. So if you are worried about your network being overloaded, you do have the option to restrict it if you want. Same thing as you saw in the previous menus, just the retention policy is how many weekly, monthly, yearly snapshots you want to keep. And unfortunately, my lab machine is not updated, but we did recently add a feature that allows you to replicate the local snapshots. So how this is different than normal is the way it works in previous versions is when you replicate, it takes a snapshot at the point of replication and then replicates that. You can actually replicate the local snapshots, which means everything is going to be exactly the same from your original server to your destination server. And replication was already an awesome feature before we added this, and now we're just taking it to the next level and making sure that your data is completely consistent if you want it to be. And then gives you a nice summary, click apply, and then it'll just start running in the background there. So as you can see, very easy to set this up. If I was doing this over the internet, the only extra step would be port forwarding. So very simple. So let that run.
Question, Dustin.
Sure.
If I'm doing this while we also have resources using the NASs, what type of load is this placing on the NAS? Is it going to cause any impact, like to any production work that's going on?
So generally for snapshot replication, it's a very efficient application just because it integrates with the file system itself. But there is a point, if your system is using like more than 90% of its resources or something like that, then that's probably the point where you don't want to run your snapshots and replication at that time, and you do want to run those later on if you can. So yeah, like and also that goes back to making sure that your NAS deployment fits what you want to do in the first place, so you're not always running like at your peak resources at all hours.
So is this more CPU or RAM or network intensive?
I would say this is network intensive more than anything. So it's gonna send the amount of data that changed between each replication or snapshot. The snapshots themselves are generally instantaneous. That's how we talk about that, just because they use so little resources. And you don't need a bunch of RAM to do this either. We have this available on NAS models that even have like 1 gig of RAM. So it doesn't need that much resources. This is more, your concern is more as if your system is already maxed out and then you're adding this on top of it. For just regular use cases, I generally don't worry about, the resource usage of this application very much.
Okay.
Alrighty, so that was my last demo for the day. So that's it for the technical material. I do want to briefly touch on some of the resources that we have available. So for both end users and resellers, we do offer a consultation. We do have next day air shipping for either you can pay for it on all of our models, but our most high-end NAS, like that UC3200, that comes with free next day air shipping if you need a replacement. We do offer training for resellers. So if you are a reseller, go ahead and contact your rep if you're haven't heard anything about this or you're not sure of the benefits of being a partner with us. And if you are a reseller, like your company has IT services and you sell, Synology NAS deployments to your customers, you can go to the contact us section on our website and just get in touch with us. Say, hey, I want to become a reseller, or hey, am I signed up already? I don't know, and we'll get you sorted out. And then for end users, so that includes like IT admins at companies. We don't leave you, like completely out of the training. We do have this monthly session that we called SPOT. That's SPOT, and the SPOT training is focused on specific subjects for each section. It's free to sign up, and if you just search like SPOT, Synology SPOT 2021 in a search engine, you'll find the page. We also have an archive of all the previous presentations, so that is a great resource for anybody to use. And from here, I'm ready to do more Q&A. Give me a brief second to get some more water in me, but yeah, this is free for any more questions that are left.
Yeah, all the questions that have been asked in the questions panel have been answered.
Well, awesome. I am okay with sticking around and seeing if anybody even has even more broader Synology questions.
Yeah, someone's posting a question right now. So can you present reference implementation? Isn't that what the University of Washington was?
I am not sure what that means. What was the question again?
Can you present reference implementation? And then
Right,
another
I'm
question.
not sure what reference implementation refers
Yeah,
to,
okay.
unfortunately.
I'll send that one over to Rachel. Um, can the replication be done on a file level instead of doing a snapshot of the entire server?
Yes, that's a good question. So in the menu, the way that it's set up is you do shared folder level snapshots. So you can't do individual files or folders within a shared folder. It would just be for the entire shared folder. But we do have another piece of software called Hyper Backup, and Hyper Backup does let you do individual files if you want to. But it's not integrated with the file system. It's not as efficient. But that is an option that's available. And generally, I recommend Hyper Backup when you want to do cloud backups, which I didn't discuss in this. The solutions that we discussed here were just for NAS to NAS backups.
All right, and a compliment from Jose said, no question, just wanted to thank you for the demo, and that all looked pretty cool.
Awesome,
And
glad to
then
hear it.
another question, which model is appropriate for a home lab, 718 or 720?
So the 718 and the 720 are the same model, just one is the newer one. So the newer model, the 720, has a faster CPU, but functionality, they're going to be the same.
Okay. The next one, who are your direct competitors and what features that your products, I guess, what features do you have that other competitors don't have?
I mean, as a Synology guy, I'm not too well versed in what our competition is doing, but generally the feedback that I hear from why people choose our products over the competition is that it's easy to use and it has a lot of capabilities. So even for more advanced features like what I showed you with snapshots and replication, when you make that just incredibly easy and there's very few steps involved. So that's kind of like what we do for all of our products is just make sure that everything is straightforward. And it just needs a wizard that you need to click next a couple times, and most everything is set up that way.
All right. Let's see here. I think Brandon was responding to Mark's question about what model is appropriate for a home lab, and Brandon was saying the 918 plus.
Yeah, so these are all plus series models that have that plus at the end. Those are all going to be your starting point for a home lab for sure.
Yeah, so my home lab, I've gone, like from the 2 drive to the 4 drive to the 5 drive to the 6 drive, and I actually have, an 8 drive 1817 and an 8 drive 1817 plus,
Right.
all of them with SSD, all of them I maxed out on RAM, and then I believe it was the 1817 plus, I also added 10 gig networking to it because 10 gig came with the 1817.
Right.
So everything in my lab is all SSD and all 10 gig, except for, management interfaces, which are all 1 gig. But the 2 NASs are all SSD and all 10 gig. I don't even plug anything into the 1 gig interfaces on the 2 NASs that I have.
Nice. Yeah, generally you see 10 gig available on the 6 bay and larger plus series.
Oh, I love the 10 gig because now with 10 gig and all SSD, I can run, probably 25, 30 VMs simultaneously off of the SSDs.
Right.
And
Yeah. You get. I mean, if you need the IOPS, SSDs are the way to go.
yeah, yeah,
I
because the
have a.
original spinning disks Synologies that I had, man, 4 VMs, the sucker was dying with 1 gig. Spinning disk just can't keep up with throughput.
Yeah. So I was gonna say I have a answer for the question earlier. I was able to look that up. What's the status on Windows Server 2019 support? We support backing up Windows Server 2019, the OS itself, and we also support backing up 2019 VMs. So I do believe that was something that we had to update
Yeah,
at some
because
point in the last year.
I was looking in the README file for the active backup for business, and it actually said version 2.1.0.9993 added support for Server 2019.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And then, so I'm not even going to try and butcher this guy's name, but he asked, does the price for the hardware and software include support, or are support fees part of a different contract?
That is a good question. So we don't offer any support contracts. The way our support works is it's free support for the lifetime of the product. This includes phone support, online chat, and tickets. The phone support and online chat is for your more basic issues. We'll walk you through as much as we can, but if something is more complex, that's when it needs a support ticket. And support ticket is also where we have things like if it's like really advanced, something that is unusual, then sometimes our developers in Taiwan will have to step in. So yeah, that's kind of the basic structure is, give us a call or hop on a chat first. From there, we'll determine if you need a ticket or not, and that's completely free.
Okay. All right. Last question. Any way to retrofit a 918 with 10 gig?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, no. This is kind of why I mentioned that it's available in 6 bay and larger. So it's the difference in processors. There aren't enough PCIe lanes on the smaller NAS that we use. So, and also just like physically, we'd have to redesign it and add a PCI slot. So unfortunately, yeah, no 10 gig on the DS919 Plus or the current model, which is the DS920 Plus.
Okay. And then someone just asked what kind of user support is offered, but that's just through your website. Once they have, I don't know if this is, so Giles, if you're hearing this, and I'm sorry if I just butchered your name, but what type of user are you talking about, and what kind of user support is offered? Who is the user? Is that the end user, or are you talking about the admin user, or what?
So there is no distinction. Whoever needs the support, we'll give them the support.
Okay.
All right, are we wrapped up on questions?
Yep, that was the last one.
All right, I just have one last slide that I'm going to throw up there. I know some of you opted in for a chance to win. There we go. A chance to win a disk station DST20 plus 2 bay NAS. I am going to pull the registration report as soon as this webinar is over, because I know some of you may have registered and joined after we were already in progress, and I want to give everyone a fair shot. So I will pull that report and do a random drawing, and keep an eye out on Twitter, or keep an eye on your inbox for an email from me to let you know that you won. What?
I'm not eligible. Darn.
So sorry.
I can always use another, Synology NAS in the lab.
Oh, well, maybe next time you can join as an attendee. So be on the lookout for that. And also, I just want to thank you guys. Thanks for attending. Thank you, Dustin. Thanks, Webster. It was a great session today. I think everything was awesome. Looks like it was all really well received, and lots of people are really interested in the information. So that's all good. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for hosting.
All right, gang. Well, hope to see you guys on another CUGC event soon. And I did throw a link to the survey in the chat window. If you don't have time to do it now, no worries. You'll get another link tomorrow in the follow-up email, so you can do it tomorrow too. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you at another CUGC event soon. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.